Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland is out today. I want to welcome to the program Adam Bonica, Associate Professor of Political Science at Stanford, publisher of On Data and Democracy Substack. We'll put a link to that, of course. Adam, am I saying your last name right?
Bonica.
Bonica. Okay. I always have to ask because 90% of the time I am not saying it right. Anybody's last name. This story, I mean, it's not so much, well, walk us through it. What is Mothership? Let's start with that.
Okay, so Mothership is a Democratic fundraising consulting firm. It is a outgrowth of the DCCC, so the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. So sort of one of the big national party committees that focuses on fundraising to help Democrats win elections and congressional seats. Mothership.
And we should say Mothership is a firm. It's an outgrowth in the sense that that people who used to work for the DCCC.
Yes, that's what it
essentially privatized, decided they're not going to work for the DCCC anymore. They're going to do what they were doing at the DCCC, but they're just going to do it for themselves.
For profit, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and so they left the DCCC. There were 3 former staffers there, and they founded this firm, and they took the sort of dirtiest tactics that were being used by the party at the time to fundraise, and they just turned up the knob to like 11. And early on, what they did is they started up their own PAC, which was called End Citizens United. Some of you may have encountered it because they spam you all the time. And they started to use that as their first client, and they started to build a business off of this. Fast forward, that was back in 2014 when they founded it, 2015 when End Citizens United came out. And they have been sort of in the shadows of Democratic fundraising for quite some time now. And over time, they have sort of built this network of PACs that have been using these tactics, the spam tactics, to fundraise a lot of money. And most of it has either been spent on fundraising expenses or been funneled back to this Mothership strategies as a firm.
So it's almost like I'm trying to make an analogy that people would understand, but it would be, I start my podcast and then I also start an advertising business, and I pay myself the advertising. I pay the advertising business 35% of what podcast does. And then also I have a temp agency that sends out producers, and I pay the temp agency to send me producers. So I'm basically I'm dealing with myself. I've opened up all these different satellite shops around me that ultimately pay me in, like, I have 6 different revenue streams. So this is out there. We should also say, I think like End Citizens United right now, I read somewhere that they actually were like sending out an email with a poll talking about corruption, which I thought was rather poetic. So this Mothership, these guys come from the thing, and I remember that era of DCCC emailing. There was a lot of concern by activists and people sort of like in the fundraising world that this whole strategy of sending emails saying like, we're going to lose, and every 15 minutes,
we're doomed.
Yes. There's a term for it that you use in your piece, like churn and burn, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so churn and burn.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Tell us the different philosophies that you could have theoretically for fundraising before we get to the sort of really the most grotesque part about Mothership.
Yeah. So, I mean, I should state up front that in terms of the fundraising strategies, the reason I started looking into all this is because this approach to fundraising, where you're essentially being deceptive, predatory, and trying to find marks who will donate to you, is just hugely detrimental to the party's reputation. And so one of the strategies that has really taken hold among a lot of these sort of powerful fundraisers is this churn and burn strategy, where you just say whatever you need to say. You make up stuff. You try to confuse people to like click on your links. You say that there's an $800 match. These are all lies, right? These are very deceptive tactics. So that churn and burn is basically do anything you can to raise a buck. A better fundraising strategy is one where you inspire donors through having good policies or doing something courageous to donate to further the cause. And I think that's the dichotomy here, where you can think of getting people to donate to you because you're doing good things and you're inspiring them. That's the model that should be forefront. The model right now of this churn and burn is just, it is doing so much damage to trust between the party and donors, and trust between and the brand of the party.
Now, is the party, and I want to make sure that we distinguish here between the party in terms of like and Mothership. With that said, and then we could talk about though the problematic sort of, they would call it synergy or that exists there. But like it seems that the churn and burn is not as intense as it was at other periods, and that some politicians choose to use it and some don't, based on that. I mean, but if you're Mothership, you don't pass policies, right? Like you're not people. The deceit is a lot of times where it's like Zohran Mamdani is one, and help support Zohran's policies by donating here, and it's really just like anybody could say that about anything, right? Like they could say, America's, you could. I mean, the Zohran thing is a perfect example. They've probably done that, I would say, and that's the deception, right? Like the idea that somehow this money is going to go somehow support Zohran, and in fact, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not even going to support anybody. That's really sort of the most scandalous thing. I mean, like we can have debates, it seems to me, about what's an effective email strategy, and are there moments where we desperately need money to get people on the ground game, and so yes, we're going to sacrifice best long-term email practices over the next 3 months and do it. But that's sort of debatable, arguable, I guess, but the rest of it is just astonishing. Walk us through how you found out where the money was going.
Yeah, so I started out with the debate that you were just talking about. Like, I just thought it was not a good strategy. And so I looked into, okay, so who is sending me all these texts? Right? Like I literally just received one right before I got on about Texas redistricting that has nothing to do with it. And so I was getting these spam texts. So I was like, well, there's an identifiable set of PACs that are sending it. And so I went and just started looking at those PACs. So I spend a lot of time in campaign finance data. It's sort of the area of my research. And so I started pulling on this thread of, okay, all these spam PACs, where are they, like, who are they paying? What are the firms that are central to this operation? And they all led back to this one operation, Mothership Strategies. And it was not a difficult thing to find. And so I've included like all the data online. You can just sort of look it up yourself on the FEC website. It's just a very clear pattern of, you just look up these PACs. If someone spams you, look up the PAC on the FEC and see who they're paying money to. They happen to be this sort of nexus of PACs where they're doing transfers between each other. And so, for instance, Progressive Turnout Project is one of the main ones, where a lot of the other PACs, like Stop Republicans, will send money to Progressive Turnout Project. And then Progressive Turnout is sort of like a shell game where they'll raise a bunch of money, transfer it over to another PAC, and so it's harder to track. But it doesn't take that much work to just look at these patterns of transfers and these patterns of spending, and you can sort of track how much money is going back to Mothership, and it's most of it.
Okay, so who who started these PACs? Like I was not terribly savvy to how a PAC can be a scam in and of itself. Like, years ago, I knew a guy who, I was sympathetic to. He was setting up a PAC to help unions, and so I did a little something to help promote it. I may have interviewed him. I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't until later where I'm like, wait a second. He's not taking any money from the PAC, but the PAC was covering all his expenses to go and give talks to unions who would pay him money. And the whole thing was like just a way to get other people to cover part of his essentially business thing. And I became very skeptical of PACs. There are some obviously that are good and are genuinely and they're transparent. But who owns these different PACs? Like who started them?
So often that information is only partially transparent. What you can see is that there's about 4 or 5 of the main PACs that have been feeding Mothership are run by the same treasurer. So you can identify who the person who's sort of running the operations of the PAC is. I believe his name is Harry Pascal. And there's like networks of these that sort of exist. And that's part of the issue. Like, so if you set up like multiple PACs and you're transferring money between them, and then all this money is being funneled up to one strategy firm, that raises a bunch of questions about what you're exactly doing with that money. And so, for instance, I mentioned Progressive Turnout Project. They're a PAC that they claim to focus on turnout efforts, and yet they've raised about $10.8 million so far this election cycle, and so far they've already spent 9.2. And there hasn't been an election. So it's hard to really make sense of if that's going towards turnout efforts.
And so if I follow, what happens is Progressive Turnout Project will raise $10 million, let's just say, or let's just call it Progressive Project, just for the sake and they raise $10 million and they send $5 million to Progressive Wind Project, and they send $3 million to Progressive Wind Project, and now it looks like okay, they're sending money out to other operations, but all 3 of these operations are funneling 80% of that money to Mothership for services rendered, essentially. And so each one looks like they're distributing to other places. They're not spending the money. We're just helping other entities that are doing good stuff. And they all just happen to use Mothership as okay. And so, and this is legal, we should say.
Yeah, this is, as far as I can tell, all of this is legal. I have not uncovered any illegal activity as far as I know.
It's amazing. I mean, these are would they refer to themselves as political or social entrepreneurs, I guess. And so, and what does then the Mothership do? I mean, aside from obviously pay their people, but I mean, there's costs associated with sending out a bunch of emails and text and this and that. But it's all just sort of business costs. How much money ends up going to clients? Like the number that you found since 2018, Mothership linked PACs raised approximately $678 million. This number excludes money raised by the firm's other clients, like candidate campaigns. So they have some candidates. I mean, I went to the Mothership website. It's sort of fascinating. But specifically on this sort of like network, almost like this beltway of PACs. Of that total fundraising haul, $159 million was paid directly to Mothership Strategies for consulting fees. That's not the expenses associated with sending out stuff. That's just like, how do we do this? And that's the vast majority of, well, not the vast, but more than half of what Mothership has been paid by all of its clients. So what appears to be 60% of its business is just raising money really for themselves. And then they're surrounded, then they sort of like put, some, I wouldn't call it window dressing, but it's sort of like, it's almost like if, I'm not suggesting any criminal activity here, I'm just coming up with an analogy. And I'm not saying that Mothership is money laundering at all, but like if I had a sporting goods store and was getting money funneled in there, but I'd still really try and sell sporting goods. And so I'd have two revenue streams, the sporting goods store and then this sort of like other one that is sort of a little bit more dubious. What is the so they're building relationships. I just want to make understand why they have been able. I mean, surely people have been aware of this, and you and I don't know. I don't know if you know, and it would be good if there was reporting. But it seems hard to imagine that a professional in this industry wouldn't be aware of this. Yet, Mothership has had pre-existing relationships with the Democratic Party. They're doing fundraising for other people. I went to their website. It's also fascinating. There is no about us on the website. You can't tell who this is. They just sort of forefront their clients, and they mix in their clients. It's interesting because they do. You can go to their website and almost it sort of expresses that dynamic. It shows all the different people here. Bold Democrats, End Citizens United, Equality PAC, and then there's John Ossoff and Jamie Harrison and Demand Justice. I mean, Demand Justice is a very, I think, legitimate organization, and actually very clearly has an agenda, but it's sitting next to, Defend the Vote. And I don't know, PACs that are a little bit dubious. Does that seem to be what's going on there?
Yeah, there are a network of PACs that basically just exists to be in this Mothership infrastructure, but then there are a bunch of PACs that are genuinely legitimate and have just decided that these tactics, which are extremely underhanded and predatory, are acceptable ways to proceed. And I think that's sort of how you think about it. This is condoned by many aspects of the Democratic establishment, is one way to think about it. But there's a lot of people in that arena who really dislike what this is, and have been pushing back. And so I think one of the big questions is, what does sort of the Democratic establishment do now? Do they try to snuff this out, or do they allow it to proceed as it's been? It's technically profitable, but it's not actually producing significant resources in the way that you would want to win elections.
It's just sort of it's these guys just saying well, we need a subsidy to do this, when in fact you really don't. I mean, that's a pretty juicy subsidy. I imagine you've gotten a lot of emails over the past, you published this, I think, only a day or two ago. And I imagine you've heard from a ton of people, both reporters and Democratic operatives who are coming and going I've noticed this. Is there anything in a vague sense? Can you tell us what you've maybe seen from Democrats, both professional, DNC people and?
Yeah, so there are a lot of people who work in Democratic politics who have been someone's found Mothership. They've known about this, and they're they dislike it. They really hate the tactics, and so there's that element of it. There's another element of people who are and this is sort of really sad, that people I've been giving to these PACs and I had no idea, and I've been struggling to work it into my budget, and this is where sort of like the predatory tactics come in. So I've heard a lot from a lot of those people, and that sort of breaks my heart that they've been taken for a ride. The one group I have not heard from is the DCCC or the DSCC or the DNC. I've not heard anything from them, and I am unsure how they're going to respond to this all.
Is there anybody out there that you're aware of that has just like a clearinghouse of like, you see things like charity navigators? Is there a center to the left, PAC navigator?
So a lot of people have pointed to Charles Gaba's website. I don't have the exact website. Generally speaking, if you're giving directly on Act Blue to candidates, that's going to be legit. For the most part, I wouldn't worry about that. And
that's why, incidentally, the Trump regime is coming after Act Blue. That's because that is the most efficient way, both in multiple ways, most efficient way to support Democratic candidates.
Yes. Yeah, is Act Blue, in terms of like candidates fundraising on the site, that's not implicated at all in this. I would hope that Act Blue, and they are working to sort of clear out these types of less legitimate PACs. And so I know that they have efforts internally where they're trying to make sure that there's less of this on the platform and more of the legitimate fundraising.
How does these PACs get their email or phone number lists?
I would love to know the answer to that. My assumption is that they purchase them somehow, but that's not transparent at all in the FEC data.
Interesting. You were saying that GABA's site has at least some type of clearinghouse of a ranking of these things?
Yeah, so when I went to a site, he sort of lists out all the different races and candidates that you could be giving to. It's just sort of a nice way to just break everything down to see like who's running in your district, who might be running in your state, who might be running in competitive districts. And it just links to the Act Blue pages. And again, so it's just sort of an easier way to make sure that you can navigate this whole fundraising mess where you don't have to worry so much about being caught up with any PACs that may not have the candidate's interests at front and center.
And does anybody know how to get off these lists? I mean, I have always had multiple email addresses that I use as like not burner accounts, but like spam accounts. I was very fortunate like 15 years ago to have some tech guys say like, "Oh, I've got a spam email," and I'm like, "Oh, I'll do that." Is there any way once you're on, because it just seems like they just sell it around and around?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that people have been commenting on. They say like, I say stop to quit, like it says, and then they just send it from like another one of these groups, right? So there's not, to my knowledge, an easy way to get off the list. The answer to this is hopefully having someone, with authority at the party level decide that they should not be part of the fundraising ecosystem and get ourselves out, like get everyone off the list.
How would that happen? I mean, I know this isn't necessarily your part of your portfolio, but I mean, would the chair of the Democratic Party say, anybody who works until I am convinced that Mothership is in compliance with these ethical guidelines, anybody who works with them, we're cutting off? Is that basically it?
Yeah, you just put them on a list and say anyone who work that firm and anyone who is a vendor for that firm is on a list of vendors and consultants that are not going to get paid by the party, and the party is going to say that the candidates shouldn't pay them either. If you have they tried to do there was an attempt to do that with consultants who had worked for primary challengers. They have the ability to do it. And that's not something outside of their purview. They should be policing the space. They have a responsibility to do that.
Again, this might be a little bit outside your portfolio, but it seems to me that this is not on its face part of an interesting ideological battle, but one step forward or back, downstream or upstream from it, it feels like it seems to me that that there is a consultant class within the Democratic Party that, we have this problem with Harris's campaign. Like, that was a lot of money. And we know that media buys enriches consultants much more than, let's say, canvassing does. There is just a sort of corporate mentality about, like, I'm here. The days of the company man, that was a quaint notion in the 50s. It's really like, I'm here, I'm in a corporate structure. How do I enrich myself as much as possible within this sort of like consultant world? And that to me has some ideological basis, it feels like.
I think the framework I tend to think about it in is sort of like a more traditional establishment versus anti-establishment framework within the party. For instance, there are a lot of candidates, a lot of members of the Democratic Party who really dislike the consulting class as it exists. And that's one of the dividing lines within the party. And I think it breaks along the sort of traditional establishment versus more anti-establishment element to the party. And that can break across ideological, sort of like progressive versus more centrist framework. You can be anti-establishment anywhere along that framework. And I think that's a really important divide within the party right now, and one that's playing out. That I think that this is the election cycle where the party decides whether it's going to move forward with this traditional consulting class or whether it's going to try to do something different.
I guess, and one thing to watch out in the event that happens, there's one thing to shatter the old boy network, for lack of a better term, which undoubtedly involves people of all genders and ages. But the old boy network, you don't want it to be replaced by just a new boy network, as much as you want one to be replaced by a competent network. And that's always a danger. Well, I hope that there are a half a dozen reporters who have contacted you and for the stories that they're going to write on this, because this feels like something where the more exposure it gets, and frankly, the more blame the Democratic Party apparatus gets, whether they're directly responsible for this or not, the more pressure on them, because they are the ones who are in the best position to shut this down. Are there other entities aside from Mothership that you've come across? Are you is this become a little bit of a project where you're starting to look at other constellations of these super PACs, or is the mothership of this?
I haven't, but there is good research in political science that uses machine learning methods to identify scam PACs. And so I just wrote this a few days ago, as you noticed, but I am looking into whether, I can make, a broader research agenda out of looking for how to identify these types of groups, building off of existing research. And so it's a known problem, and I'm only adding a little bit to the broader perspective, but I think this is a really important spoke and hub of this type of bad actor in the space. And so I do hope that there is a response.
Well, we're going to link back to your Substack, to this specific piece and the Substack more broadly, so that we can follow up on the work you're doing. Really appreciate it. It is, I feel like, something that there was people maybe had a vague awareness that there was something wrong here. And I think this is clearly it, and maybe more. but really appreciate your, the work and your coming on to talk about it.
Well, thanks for having me on. This was great.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.